Violence, violence, violence. I'm kidding. Well, there is a fair bit of violence in this movie. Child abuse, animal torture, domestic violence, serial killings. There's a lot of elements in this movie, and that's actually one of the reasons why I kind of delayed this review. After watching this movie, and I saw this about 10-15 days back, but after watching this movie, I kept thinking to myself, is this a movie I want to recommend, and that's why I hesitated about putting this review out there. The more I thought about it, I realized that, there's a certain amount of novelty in how this movie is presented. So I thought I'll do my review, and here it is. Don't get me wrong, when I speak about violence and I talk about all these elements that I mentioned, it's not that this movie is unwatchable, or there's something gory, or lots of blood and lots of guts, that makes it difficult to watch. That's not what I'm talking about. There are certain uncomfortable scenes in this movie, genuinely creepy, genuinely upsetting. Because when I saw this movie, especially, there's a certain amount of suggestive violence towards children and depictions of violence also towards children, both. So when I was watching them, genuinely, it upset me when I was watching it, because I felt really uncomfortable. There's also a very interesting serial killer investigation going on also, and the main issue I would say I have this movie is that there are a lot of elements and social themes they're covering. If they stuck with the main plot that involves the serial killer, this movie would have been a more interesting investigative thriller, but I can't. I would call this more of a psychological thriller, a dark psychological thriller. That's what I would call it. But there are a lot of unnecessary characters and subplots that could have been avoided, because when you get to the end of the movie, again, when you look back, there were certain subplots. I'm not saying that they weren't interesting, but they didn't really contribute much to the main plot. If you kind of avoided them also, it would have been fine. Now, having said that, I think Vipin Das, director and writer for this movie, has done a great job in delivering something new. There's a novel approach in how he's telling the story with his characters, so I'll give him that. But not all of it works. That's the only negative I think that's going on. Now I'll go into the main plot of this movie. Saiju Kurup is the leading man in this movie, and he's a circle inspector of a very sleepy remote town. Not much happens over there, and you have petty criminals coming in, and Saiju Kurup, he's very fond of the game Antakshari. He's he likes singing also, so he tells these criminals, either sing a song or you're going to get beaten up. Either one you have to choose. So it's funny, he makes these bad guys or petty criminals, he makes them sing. He also plays the game Home with his wife, played by Priyanka Nair. We haven't seen her in a while. I feel like, Priyanka Nair, we haven't seen her in a movie for a while, so it was a pleasant surprise to see her in this movie. He also has a 8 or 10-year-old daughter. So at home also, his family plays this game. They give each other different letters based on, how they sing. Now, speaking of Saiju Kurup's police officer, he plays a very, very normal, everyday person or police officer that you can see. He's not exactly Bharat Chandran, but he tries to be as honest and sincere as possible with his job and with his case. And as he's leading a normal life, suddenly one day he gets a call, and the guy on the phone tells him, he gives him a letter, and he says, okay, this is the letter. I think it says Aksharam Pa or something like that, and the guy tells the Saiju Kurup, okay, start singing. And Saiju Kurup is really confused, and he's like, what? I don't understand. Who are you and where are you calling from? And he's like, okay, if you're not going to sing, I'll make your daughter sing. And he hangs up on him. And Saiju Kurup's like, he's really confused. Like I said, this is a very small town that he is, and he's a small town cop. He's a circle inspector. He's not like a very intense investigative genius or anything like that. He's a very normal guy, and you should see him sometimes handle situations or speak to certain guys. He's very likable, very pleasant about him, and just like that. So one day his daughter is coming home from school. His wife is inside the house, and there's a guy who chases the daughter, right? He has a paper bag on his head, and it's a scary visual, just a paper bag with eyes and all that, and and he's got a stethoscope in his hands, and he chases the girl and he strangles her right in the road. So the mother sees it, and she comes running out. As she's running out and coming towards the road, this guy lets it go and he runs, and the girl, shocked, she can't speak for a few days, all that. Saiju Kurup is, understandably disturbed by all of this. He can't understand what's going on, and he keeps getting these weird calls. So that's how the whole case begins, and obviously the guy who calls him, he's a serial killer of sorts. So that's the main plot of this movie. Then there's a flashback sequence also. The flashback sequence and this main story are connected. I'm not going into the flashback sequence because that's a bit of a spoiler, and that directly connects to the main story. Now, having said that, I'll tell you one thing. The climax of this movie, that's what makes it worthwhile. When you sit through all of this, and like I said, there are genuinely some uncomfortable scenes and everything, but you sit through all of this, you come to the final 20 minutes. The final entire 20 minutes is the climax. It's absolutely scary. That's the word I would use, because and it's mostly a single take sequence, this entire 20 minutes. Maybe there are a few cuts here and there, maybe like 2 or 3 cuts they had to make it, but it starts off with a person waking up from bed and rushing into the forest. You gotta see it. Genuinely felt like a horror movie play out. And I, in the thumbnail of this video, I mentioned the singing serial killer, right? Well, the serial killer sings, and he's playing Antakshari also during that whole sequence. It is so creepy, and almost like a horror movie feel you get to it. And the way the character deals with that situation, Saiju Kurup, but how he deals with that situation and how the whole situation plays out right to the end, that was the best part. I really enjoyed it, to the point where I was like, I wanted to, obviously this movie is streaming on Sony Liv, right? So I kind of wanted to stream ahead to see what was happening, because I was genuinely feeling a little creeped out by it, like, okay, what's going to happen is something, because it's full darkness. This guy like runs out of the house, and he's kind of in the forest area, and it's like, it's so unpredictable, and you're tempted to kind of move your stream ahead to see what's going on or what will happen, but don't do it. It's worth it. I didn't do it, and in spite of the temptation, I just sat back and I watched it. And the climax is what really made me appreciate this movie, and how they kind of wrote all that sequence, and how it was shot. Again, there's a lot of one take sequences, especially in the climax. It's like they forgot to say cut. The director forgot to say cut, and they were just rolling and rolling and rolling. They just went with it, and that was the best part of the movie. Final thoughts and rating. I felt like the director, they've done something new with this. Usually with a serial killer, it's very easy to get caught up in the legend of the serial killer, and come up with dramatic murder scenes and all of that. That's not the case over here. There is a and again, the hero is not exceptionally intelligent, where he thinks and comes up with clues. He's a police officer, right? And he's trained for it. So he uses that to investigate the case, because like I said, the attack came on his family, and he can't figure out why, and he keeps getting just threatening phone calls and things like that. So he's sort of investigating through proper channels, or what's available to him. Along with that, he gets caught up in the controversy also, but he's still progressing ahead. And to assist him, he's also got a sub-inspector played by Sudhi Koppa, and he had a good role, because he, in spite of all the problems Saiju Kurup's character is facing, this Sudhi Koppa's sub-inspector, he's really trusts his senior officer, and he supports him throughout this investigation, and helps him throughout the case. So that's very interesting what they've done with that character, and I like that role. There are several inconsistencies in basically the storytelling itself. Like I said, they're trying to go into different social causes and issues, different themes, things like that. Finally, when you get to the end of it, you're like, that was not necessary. If they were looking to kind of increase the runtime to about 2 hours, maybe I felt like they could have closed this movie in 1.5 hours. That was all. That was just that was all that was necessary, because it feels like a very small movie, and they've shot it mostly on. I think they've shot in a very small town or a hilly area or something, and it's very quiet over there. And that there's a that quietness plays to the overall mood of the movie. You genuinely feel like there's some tension, there's some something scary out there, and that's the kind of how they build up this serial killer. You don't know who he is. He could be anywhere, he could strike anytime, so that fear is there, but they keep distracting us with other subplots and characters that it's kind of unnecessary, which is why I stress that this movie could have been a whole lot better if they stuck to the main plot of the movie. My rating for this movie is 2.5 out of 5. It's an engaging psychological thriller, but weighed down by certain inconsistencies with its subplots that focus on various social themes and ideas. But however, I would definitely say it's worth a watch, especially if you're looking for an adult movie, you know, or something that's scary. And if you're in mood for something like that, definitely, this is definitely worth a watch. That's it for the review, guys. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up icon, and of course subscribe to my channel for more reviews and videos like this. As always, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Bye.